It was an ordinary day for young Jack as he walked down the street after work. He lived in a small town where everyone knew each other and where not much happened. He worked at the library and loved his job very much. There he could read books and talk to visitors about different topics. One day he was walking home from work and decided to walk through the park, when suddenly a dog jumped out of the bushes. It was black with white spots, and it was wearing a red collar. It ran up to Jack and started sniffing him. She made noises that sounded like joy, jumping, wagging her tail. Jack was surprised, but not scared. He looked at the collar and saw that it had a tag attached with the owner's name and phone number. The dog's name was Mars. Jack decided to call the dog's owners and let them know he had found their pet. He took out his cell phone and dialed a number. A woman who introduced herself as Jessie answered the phone. He explained to her that he had found her dog in the park and asked how he could get it back. The woman got very excited, thanked him, and told him that Mars had escaped from the house when she opened the door to take out the trash. She was very excited, worried about him. Jessie asked for an address where she could drive up and pick up Mars. Jack dictated the name of the park, and he was surprised to learn that Mars was actually from another town. Jessie couldn't guess how Mars had ended up in another town either. She said she'd pick him up in an hour. Jack indicated that he would wait for her at the park entrance and hung up. He looked at Mars, who was looking at him with his big eyes, smiled, and stroked his head. Mars licked his hand. Jack sat down on the bench and decided to talk to Mars. He told him about his work, his favorite books, his dreams. He knew that Mars didn't understand his words, but he felt that he was listening attentively and with interest. Mars occasionally signaled his approval by wagging his tail or making noises. Jack thought he was happier than ever at that moment. After a while, he saw a car drive up to the park. An elderly woman got out of the car and walked towards them. Mars saw his mistress and ran towards her, barking and whining. Jessie picked Mars up in her arms and cried. She then walked over to Jack and froze when she saw him. After a few seconds of controlling herself, Jessie began to thank him for finding her dog. She explained to him that she loved Mars very much and that he was a member of her family. They got to talking. Jessie asked him what his name was, and he said his name was Jack. She was very happy to meet him, and as a token of her gratitude, she invited Jack over to her house for dinner, as Jessie's husband Michael would also love to meet their dog's rescuer in person. Jack agreed, and they went to the car. Mars sat in the back seat, and Jack sat next to him. The dog laid his head on Jack's knee and fell asleep. All the way Jack stroked Mars, suddenly he didn't want to part with the little guy. Jack didn't understand why the dog acted as if he had known Jack for a long time. So the car pulled up to the house. It was a cozy two-story house with a red roof and a green garden. Jack and Jessie got out of the car and went to the house. Mars ran ahead, happy to be home. On the threshold of the house stood Jessie's husband, Michael. He was a tall and strong man with gray hair and a beard. Mars ran up to him and whined. Mike grabbed Mars and pressed him to him, crying. He was madly happy to see the dog. Then, letting the dog go to the ground, he began to get to know Jack. Upon seeing him, Michael froze and didn't know how to act. He looked at Jessie and tears ran from his eyes. Jack didn't understand what was going on, but Jessie said she would explain everything to him later and invited Jack in. The house was warm and bright. Jack saw that there were pictures of the family hanging on the walls. In them, he recognized Jessie, her husband Michael, and the guy holding Mars in his arms. In the pictures, the family was very happy. Jack was stunned. From the picture, the guy looked just like him. Jessie led Jack into the living room, where there was a large sofa and a television. She said that she would make tea now, and asked him to sit and relax. She left for the kitchen, and Michael and Mars stayed with Jack. Mars lay down on the couch next to Jack and rested his head on his knee. Jack stroked his head and scratched behind his ear. Mars closed his eyes and made a contented sound. Jack asked Michael to tell him about their son, who was very much like himself. The owner of the house agreed, only suggested that they go to the kitchen and at the table. He and Jessie would tell him everything. They got up from the couch and went into the kitchen. Mars ran after Jack as if he didn't want to let him out of his sight. Jessie invited them to sit down and served them meat baked with vegetables. Jack was pleased, as he was hungry. Jessie then served a large apple and cinnamon pie on the table, poured tea into cups, and cut the pie. She served a piece of pie each to Michael and Jack, and began to tell a story from her family's life. From what Jessie told, Jack learned that Mars had been living with them for 5 years. They got him from the shelter when he was a puppy. He was the smallest and weakest of the bunch, but they had decided that this dog should be in their family. Or rather, it wasn't them who chose. It was their son who chose his friend. He chose Mars. Their son's name was Myson. He took care of Mars, and he grew into a wonderful dog who loves and protects us very much. We love and care for him very much too. Mars loved Mason very much. But a year ago, their son died. Mars was very homesick, running away from home to find their son. They didn't know what to do. But this time Mars disappeared for a long time, and they already thought that he was in trouble. But then Jack called and told them that their dog had been found. They were overjoyed. But what was their amazement when they saw that the guy who found their Mars, as to drops of water similar to their son. Jack himself was very surprised by the story. So it turns out that Mars behaved to him as if Jack were his master. Michael and Jessie asked Jack that, if he had the opportunity, could he sometimes come to their house and be with Mars and them, since they're already elderly people? Jack not only looks alike, but also reminds them of their son in character. Jack felt very sorry for the couple and agreed to come and visit them on weekends. Michael and Jessie were happy to hear this, and as if rejuvenated. In time, Jack quit his job and moved to the city where Michael, Jessie, and his native and beloved Mars lived, who changed his fate.